What's going on, guys? Dylan here. Today we will be going over a ticker symbol analysis on the ticker symbol COIN, Coinbase. Coinbase has made some massive moves within the markets the last few weeks. A lot of great news, right? A lot of excitement. It's been reinstilled within the markets. You see a massive bar volume on coin, the biggest volume coin has had in the last year and a half. So there's a lot going on with Coinbase, guys. It's a very exciting time. In today's video, we will do a non-biased technical analysis using data points and implied probability to get a good gauge where stock price may or may not go within the next few days and or weeks. With that being said, let's go move over to the weekly time frame so we can get a bird's eye broad perspective. And then we'll jump through each single interval time frame until we eventually get a very big scope of what we're looking at, and we'll make our final assessment. Alrighty, guys, looking at the weekly time frame, we do see these prior lows we've been mentioning over the last couple weeks on the channel. They have officially stepped in. Once we've seen this big wide bar come in with these thin candles, we thought there was a lot of potential for the stock as we came down to a massive support level, guys. This region has, held the Coinbase when it's collapsed from this, thin periods, and it's literally gathered in the zone for about 8 weeks, perfectly bouncing in this spot. And we came all the way down just to bounce at that nice level. So this is very nice, guys, on the weekly time frame. Congrats to anyone who has seen those videos. But with that being said, guys, we gotta mention the elephant in the room. We have this huge weekly bar, wide bar, whatever you want to call it, on the Coinbase weekly time frame. And when you see these kind of massive candles for a lot of companies, it can be a little bit worrisome. As yes, guys, it does look very, very nice, right? But then again, what comes up must come down. And you see that in a lot of mining stocks, but Coinbase, I think, is very different, guys. When we look in the past at these very big movements, it actually shows that psychology aspect to where stock price may go. So when we look in this past movement, we've seen a lot of volatility, right? Just for example, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 candles of nice big green bars. So eventually flipping red, coming back down with another volatile move, right? It's yanked down, followed with a big move up. Right when Coinbase gets very thin and it just kind of chops around, it builds a base, it doesn't really do a whole lot. That's when you need to be a little bit concerned, guys, right? Eventually we ended up breaking out, but then we get to the top of this range before getting really thin, really awkward candles, not really forming much. Then we sink, guys. So to see this massive movement, guys, it definitely does give you a very, very good indication that new buying presence can be available as far as the next couple of weeks or months perspective. So I love what I'm seeing as far as a weekly perspective. Yes, we did bounce from these lows very, very quickly, as we mentioned. Did have a huge gap up, right? A lot of news and this and that. But from a buyer's perspective, it's what you want to see. This is not what a seller wants to see. It's not what the bears want to see within the stock. So looking at that, that's very, very clear, guys. We will follow this candle. And the next big thing that's popping out right on the chart, guys, is this very big descending channel has been broken on the weekly time frame. We do have a weekly breakout. So when we look in the past, there is about literally 15 weeks of candles rushing up against this major level, rejecting, super, super technical. And then at that point, we came all the way down before squeezing against that trend line 1, 2, 3 times before breaking out. And very similar setup, right? We had a very, very big wide bar pushing out of this trend with a lot of good momentum of Bitcoin and news, very similar to now, right? But the wide bar is about here. It wasn't quite as big. But you see the next week to follow was a very big green day. We pushed from 270 all the way to 350. Does that mean we pushed from 266 to 350 or 340, 330, whatever? Maybe, right? There's a lot of good signs. But we can't just go off that data point. So sorry about that. So we clearly see, guys, that this descending channel has actually followed through all the way down to current price action where it's been consolidating. And it's broken that thin kind of period. So there's a lot of good signs in the weekly. We're seeing this big candle break out of this massive weekly movement. And we can get a price target for this breakout on the weekly for the next, say, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks to a couple more months, right? It can be anywhere in that time frame. But if we take the bottom of this trend, bring it to the top, and then from that point, retracted about 50%. That's what I like to do on the channel to get more accurate breakout price targets. I think 325, man, revisiting these upper wicks in this area is very, very attainable. That $300, 325, that general range. And I think that's being quite conservative, guys. It's when we really just thin this out, we zoom out. Whoops. There we go. It's bugging out a little bit. You clearly see, guys, we have a huge trend line being broken on coin. Huge. When we look in the past, it follows these trend lines. We came all the way down before bouncing at this trend line a bunch of times, right? Bouncing all up on that zone, all up on it, forming it. It has a weekly trend that got broken, and we've seen the respect from that point. So we're seeing a trend line of this degree, if not more, being broken. So as far as a weekly perspective, guys, I think coin looks very, very good. I think arguably it looks better than it has looked in the last few years, and that's great news, guys. So if you're a seller or a bear, you might not want to hear this, but here we do non-biased technical analysis, and a little bit longer than we wanted to spend on the weekly, guys, but we're seeing almost every bullish indication, right? Is it possible we do a very baby pullback on the weekly, a little bit of it? Maybe, but as far as the general gauge of where the stock is going to go, man, we look good on the weekly. So strong start for CoinBase stock. Let's go move over to the daily and see what that time frame analysis is looking like. Alrighty, guys, looking at the daily time frame, we do have a little bit more of a complex image as stock did move down in this channel. It was very, very predictable and clean. We had just a ton of touch points moving down, a very clear descending channel, followed by a pennant that was squeezed right up against the end of this channel. That's when we started to cover coin, because I've seen some good price action to come, considering that this channel is coming down at a major support level. And that's what we've seen, guys. We've seen that push up. And since then, stock just got pretty thin. It was trading a little bit strange, not a lot of momentum. And I mentioned this. We really need to see a pop. As coin, as we mentioned in the weekly analysis, it doesn't do too well when it's kind of, just thin. And it really needs volume. When it gets volume, it could be one of the strongest, if not the strongest stock in the stock market. But when it doesn't have that, it can be kind of lackluster. Even in these drips down, they usually have low volume movements. Anywho, on the daily time frame, we clearly did squeeze up over this head and shoulders, inverted, breaking up out of this, looking very, very nice. And we have a couple awkward candles on the daily. So this big wide bar pushing up, starting the day up this very positive news, that gap up, followed by a little baby candle pushing up right up over that before flushing down with a wide bar with a little wick on the bottom, and then another wide bar pushes back up with a wick on top. So right away, guys, it is clear that these two green candles, especially coming off the bullish news, it's breaking over these highs. Coin is finally curling back up to, in that essence, right? We've been in this down channel. We're coming up out of that, right? And, when you get these two green candles, you'd expect that to follow through. So for sellers to come in at the spot, there would attract a lot of sellers within the market. People making money on the stock going down, short sellers, bears, all that. Then immediately, the next day, the candles just push whoosh, right back up. Kind of define the short-term physics, perhaps. It's not exact because there's so many different data points to go off of. But this was the seller's opportunity. So seeing this is what I like to see, guys, is if it just goes straight up, eventually it's going to have a little bit of a correction or a pullback, etc. But it got tested very early in the trend, which I wasn't expecting. I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting some more price action to keep pushing up for this daily candle here. But Thursday, we ended up pushing down, right, before curling back up. So right away, guys, this is a very nice sign. As far as a psychology perspective, there's a lot of sellers that get trapped, that have been trapped in this candle. And where are they going to set their stop loss? Right at these highs. And we closed up over that on Friday, wicking up over that. So that looks very nice. And the next big elephant in the room is that we are perfectly pressed up against this resistance level, which makes a little bit more sense to why we did, have a little bit of a pullback on Thursday. But we regathered and claimed up right over that level. We do have a little bit of a close over it, about $1 over that level, or a couple dollars rather, actually, sorry, but nothing too concrete. You know, when we really see stock hold over that 262.50 level very strong, at that point we should move to 285.70 in a pretty relatively quick fashion. As really, guys, in between this level, there's no major support until $300. When we go zoom out over here, there is these highs that coincide on this $300 level, that rough area. But in between that, there's really not a whole lot. We do this minor to medium resistance point, which we do marked up at 285.70 we just mentioned. But really, guys, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see that gap getting filled. And this is a trend where a lot of stocks seem to be pushing through. We mentioned this over Tesla for 20 seconds. We mentioned this in the last Tesla video, right? We're pressed up at these highs. And we mentioned over here that there wasn't a lot of resistance between 295 and 322. We ran all the way up. Once we broke 322, we said there's virtually zero resistance at all until 349. Sorry, what's that marker? 348.50. And we ended up running all the way up in 2 days, filling that gap. So when you see a stock in this very sustained move up and there's a big gap in resistance, that's a good point of view, guys. It's usually when you see these exciting big move up, kind of like over here, you know, it's a great representation. Tesla was peaking, was doing very well, squeezing up into these highs. There was a big gap in resistance. There's no real clear spot. And that's where these volatile stocks really shine as far as the short-term momentum aspect. And since then, we did kind of, you know, form these lows down here, which we did mark up on the short-term support over here. But we'll jump back to coin. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but a lot of these stocks, man, these strong stocks kind of have these gap areas. And although there is some short-term resistance at that 285.70, which we'll keep an eye on closely, then again, the main thing we got to keep an eye on is that $300 area. Is once we break over that, we pretty much have the runway to push 325, 350, really start getting to these new potential, you know, highs and setting some really good movements to come. So as far as from a daily perspective, we definitely are bullish. Having a slight close over this 262.50, we will follow this to see if we get that nice candle confirmation, the second one to close over that. But I do think it is a very good chance, you know, we open strong Monday and just push right through that. You know, and at that point, if we open strong Monday over this level, it should be a very good days of action. But for the next few weeks, if you are seeing this a little bit later than Monday, guys, it is still very relevant. But long-term perspective, the next few weeks, days, looks very good on the daily time frame. As far as a short-term support, there really isn't a whole lot, right? Not a whole ton of support we can watch. But something that is available, guys, is if we drag this zone over here, we have this rough area around 250. The 250 perfectly lines up with that psychological level, 200, 250, 150, right, that decimal. So we'll be watching that from a short-term support aspect, but it's pretty much all we're getting from the daily, guys. You know, we're moving over this level quite strong. We mentioned a couple other things, but with that being said, guys, let's go move over to the hourly. Alrighty, guys, we're going to keep this pretty brief on the hourly time frame. There really isn't a whole lot of candles we have printed, right? So we'll keep it brief. We'll keep it to the important stuff. We don't want to overanalyze, right? So we do have a trend of higher lows being set on the hourly time frame, and this is one of the best indications for where stock price will go. As stocks don't just move linear, they don't just go all the way up like they can, but then they have to have a very harsh correction and drag down pretty violently. Or typically, right? So we're seeing this stair-step-like effect where we're coming up and we're coming down. We're coming up and we're coming down. So it does appear that we have potentially set this next higher low at this 262.50 perspective, which if this is confirmed and we do hold over this level, it's a very, very bullish sign. We're setting that stair-step on a key spot where sellers should, in theory, have some control, as they did momentarily before coming right back up and setting this low. So that's what we'll be watching on the hourly perspective over the next few weeks. We'll really be keeping a close eye, seeing where these lows will be moving up, as we won't just have a linear movement. I think there is a good chance we do have a very exciting move up quick, just looking at the chart. But typically we do see this kind of, you know, stair-step-like trend. So we'll be following that pretty closely, the coin and the hourly. But as far as now, man, guys, the main thing on the hourly the elephant in the room is this huge bar of volume. And we'll jump over the daily really fast to show that coin hasn't had more volume than this daily candle in quite some time. If we pull up the volume indicator, we can get a visual of that. So we had 72.63 million of trading volume on the daily time frame. To put that in perspective, when we had this former breakout level, this huge monstrous move up, which I'm sure a lot of you long-term coin investors remember, around that November time, in this huge candle, huge gap up, we only had about 30 million in volume, guys. So we have double that. So this is the most volume that coin has had on the hourly time frame, on every time frame, in the last year and a half, 2 years. We were looking earlier before briefly studying, filming this video. So we'll be watching that, guys. This volume will have a pretty big indication to show, how fast we'll get there. If we see some more volume really starting to pick up, it's almost a matter of time, considering the stock at this point. Within the next few days, we rip up higher. So we'll keep an eye on the volume, guys. But on the hourly, we're watching these higher lows being printed. We'll be keeping an eye on this major level. We pressed up against that for about 8-9 hours, flushing, coming back over, testing that for 2 hours before regaining it and kind of chilling out over that. Something you want to see, guys. We mentioned that on the channel regularly. To see a stock good over resistance, chill up on it and really consolidate, form a base, and then go, it's a lot more sustainable. So from an hourly perspective, a little bit more volatile, a little bit more random, harder to analyze, but it is bullish. We're seeing all the signs, guys. So if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, all that. Keep an eye on that 262.50 resistance level, which could turn possible support here at 285.70 and that psychological and major $300 level resistance. Like, subscribe, all that, guys. We will follow coin a couple times a week. It depends how many times you guys want to see the stock. Hope you enjoyed. Have a good one. Take care and goodbye.